Alright, gamers, what's up? It's your boy Golden12 back with another Honkai Star video, and I want y'all to take a look at something. Alright, you see this little thing at the bottom? Discord? Nah, hit that mute button for those of you that got mad at me last time I uploaded a video and didn't have it muted. But yeah, today I just want to talk about some pretty simple things about the game, right? And like how I sort of see it going forward in terms of like free-to-play perspective. As many of you know, if you've been watching the channel or keep up with me at all, I'm a hard committed free-to-play in like every single gacha game I've touched. The only time I broke that rule was within Genshin, and that's not the reason I quit. It's just kind of felt like it. It's at the end of the day, I normally just don't spend it all in these games. Haven't spent a cent on Honkai, don't plan to. And that's basically that. So I've been beating all the content, right? Myself free to play, relatively easily, right? I've used strategy to, sort of outdo some limitations, right? So you can get around some, quote unquote gacha barriers to actually beat the content completely free to play, right? And so I'm going to talk about that a little bit. I've done other videos going over that specific thing, like for pure fiction. Obviously I'm going to talk about summoning, right? Who to summon for, selector, and other things with that. And then what you need to do if you want to be efficient with farming and not waste your time. And then also my personal recommendations and a little bit about future characters. Now to start with the first note, is it free-to-play friendly? I would say yes, it is free-to-play friendly. And actually, let me adjust the camera. Sorry about that. The camera's always in a weird position because of how my monitors are set up. Anyways, I would say it's relatively free-to-play friendly. And I mean that in sense of like, if you keep up with the game, you won't have an issue. You don't have to keep up with the game necessarily. It's just that, as for me, I've had zero issues keeping up with the game and going about it, the way I want to, right? Just enjoying it in my own sort of way, right? Which isn't really all that special. I just, beat the content, log off, right? It's pretty simple. If you are wondering, it's like, oh, do I have to spend money to get every character or the light cones, which would be their weapons, other things? No, you don't have to. I've been able to easily get all that I've wanted free to play. Now, there is one caveat to that, is that their release cadence for characters is very high. They've so far released 2 to 3 characters every single update, and that can be troubling for some players who, if they want all a certain type of character, or if they're looking for a, specific character that maybe hasn't had a rerun or something like that. And so it might be hard for you to decide who to summon for with all the characters you're releasing, right? And that's why you should, take in consideration, if you are at all worried about clearing content, so like the meta-wise stuff, probably look into and research your specific character before actually summoning, right? Otherwise, like what I always say, get who you like, just have fun. Right. They give a higher amount of summons than like other gacha games, right? Not going to reference a certain one because some people like to apparently invalidate your opinion because you mentioned that one. But another game possibly made by the same company, this game gives you a pretty good amount of summons in comparison, right? So far in the most previous update, so 2.0 release, we have gotten over 110 summons completely free to play, right? And that's including a lot of things. Let me actually pull that up. Yeah, so I've shown this in another video that I put up on the channel, that we've actually gotten an absurd amount of summons, right? And this is just including the regular wishes, not including the 17 standard wishes, right? And that's also not including character leveling, so you could get over 20. So with just this completely free to play, if you have 100% cleared everything, you've gotten over 120 summons worth, right? If you're spending money, then you would have gotten more, obviously. Like Battle Pass would have given you however much, I don't know off the top of my head, but you would have gotten significantly more, maybe over 150, possibly 180 summons this update if you actually spend money on the regular stuff like Welkin and all that, right? Probably not 180, that's maybe a bit too high, but you see what I'm saying, right? They have been you can argue generous, but at the same time, as I said, there's the release cadence of characters that is relatively high for a gacha, right? Having at least this style where they release multiple per update, right? And major ones at that, right? A lot of these characters are very sought after, and with the current lineup of characters, reruns, like the new ones and the reruns, it's pretty tight on who people want to pull, I would say, as there's a lot of appealing aspects to every character in terms of power, design, all that stuff. Right. I would say the game's not really that challenging. Again, you can brute force a lot of things. You can use strategy to beat it. like myself, right? A couple people say some of my stuff isn't free to play relatable, and I guess that's fine. But even with my terrible Jing Yuan build that I've shown in many videos, I've been able to clear content, you know, pretty fine, right? And again, I haven't really been using him. I've been using the stronger units, obviously. But you can realistically, if you invest into your character enough, beat all the content without issue, right? And as well, if you use your brain a little bit, understand the game, you won't have an issue at all. So yeah, that's basically that. There's more to it than just those couple of things, but I'd say it is free to play friendly. The one thing that I think is huge is that I'm not even a turn-based gamer, and this is the longest I played a turn-based game, right? So there's clearly something keeping me playing the game, right? It's not just the waifus. So yeah, that's really about that. Again, you just gotta really understand the game, and then you'll see with time, and then, you know, putting time into like building the characters and stuff, you'll see that like, oh yeah, it is pretty fun, and that you'll possibly even, you know, want to keep playing in the future. I don't know, right? I think it is pretty free to play friendly. If you, as long as you don't try to get every character, I guess, really. I guess that goes into my next point. But if you are trying to get every single character free to play, like most gotchas, I wouldn't say that's going to happen. If you're lucky, possibly, because they do give you 100 summons. The pity in this game is 90. So like, even if we're getting like 70 to like 120 summons per update, it's pretty big range. You can basically guarantee at least one 5-star per update, which is pretty solid, right? Assuming you win 50-50, that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, I'd say it's pretty free to play friendly. I could probably go more into that, but I don't want to keep this video like 30 plus minutes, right? I want to keep this going. So 300 selector. This game, in case you guys don't know, has a 300 selector in it on the standard banner. Now I've actually already claimed mine, so I can't even show you properly. But we can look at the character details, I believe. Is there an image? There's no image. Well, you're going to see text today. Yeah, so this game does have a 300 selector that gives you a choice between any of the standard characters on it, being Himiko, Welt, Bronya, Gepard, Clara, Yangqing, and Bailu. Now, a lot of players probably won't know who to pick up for this, and there's a very simple answer. It's Bronya. The answer is literally always Bronya. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are going to be like, why is it always Bronya? It's because Bronya is one of the strongest supports in the game, and she fundamentally changes your account for the better. Now, this is debatable now that Sparkle exists, right? Because Sparkle does similar things, but they function different enough to where you want both of them, right? So you don't need Bronya, as to where like in 1.0 and before, like in previous updates, people would argue you need Bronya, right? So it's really here or there if you want Bronya, but I would say Bronya is the #1 pick. Second to Himiko, right? And why Himiko? And that's because recently they introduced a new endgame mode called Pure Fiction that is AoE spam. And Himiko, being an AoE unit, is very strong in that mode, especially when you combine her with Herta. Those two together, perfect mob clearing synergy, and they work great inside Pure Fiction. So that's why I can actually recommend those two characters. Now, as for everybody else, it's here nor there, because the main thing is, right, Yangqing, for most people, is considered bad. So you can kind of just completely ignore him, right? Clara is okay, but her issues are more of how the game functions, more of the character herself, right? We don't have content where it's spamming a bunch of attacks. She's getting a lot of damage off, and even though she's pretty tanky for like a DPS character, she's not ideal for any scenarios in the current, you know, sandbox of the game, right? So these two are just kind of not recommended. The other three characters, Gepard, Bailu, Welt. Bailu is a pretty solid healer. However, she does lack one key flaw for in-game content, a cleanse. A cleanse is important because there is a lot of CC in a lot of these in-game fights or other debuffs applied to your character, and you want to be able to remove those and not die immediately, right? Bailu does give some damage reduction and has a revive, which in some cases can be beneficial, but she does suffer in that regard, not having a cleanse. So a lot of players probably won't realize that she's not, I guess, meta, you could say, starting out, right? So they might just invest in a Bailu and be like, oh, wait, after I get these limited 5-star sustains, Bailu's completely useless, right? Instead of like leveling a 4-star support, that would have been way more beneficial for your account. So it's like, I can't really say for Bailu. Japard is an interesting one because Japard works fine as a solo sustain, but he's actually like one of the best units for simulated universe and like these event modes, right? Because he has a massive AoE shield that he can get reliably. So he's actually like one of the best characters for any of the event modes. So which is kind of weird because he's kind of mediocre inside like MOC Pure Fiction. Well, he actually is trash in Pure Fiction. But he's like mediocre in MOC, but then it's like a god in the event modes. So he's like, if you get him, it's not a bad thing at all. But for a 300 selector where you can guarantee one of these 5 stars, I wouldn't get him, right? Unless of course you really like him, like always get him. But he's like the less important pick, right? Just being a complete shielder. He can tank pretty well, but your focus when you're starting out is building up to a level to where you can use multiple characters, right? Japard doesn't really help you with that. He's just there to tank, and the same issues with Bailu, you know, no cleansing or any like other defensive utility. He's legit just the shield, right? He can freeze, but you're not going to get that like consistently at all. Especially with how you build them. It's not going to happen. Excuse me. Then Welt. Welt being the final one, and the reason I don't recommend him is not because he's bad, it's just because you get more use out of the other characters. Welt is a perfectly sufficient character to use and have. He'll also be useful for future characters, and depending on team setups, he can function as both a pseudo-sustained character with certain matchups, and as a DPS, right? Or a debuffer in some cases. He has quite a bit of variety. I have Welt myself, right? I used him for a while because he was my like first 5-star. But you know, I haven't used him in a very long time, and also he doesn't see that much use outside of like I guess main DPS Welt teams, right? That some people do here. He's not like an ideal pick, I would say, so just sort of there, right? And that's kind of the thought process of the 300 selector. It's not very complicated. Bronya is just like stupid strong, so you get her, right? Himiko is if you need an AoE Pure Fiction unit. That's about it, right? So hopefully that helps you decide on your 300 selector, right? I know a lot of people are just like, I don't know who to pick. The answer is always Bronya, unless you need another AoE for like Pure Fiction, right? And then everyone else you don't need because, in the sustains case, right, Japard Bailu, there's better sustain alternatives, like getting a limited sustain, or using like someone like Lynx, right, who does have a cleanse and heals pretty well. And then, you know, the other like DPS characters like, well, you know, Yangqi, Clara, you'll again, it's either you use a limited DPS or there's other options about the same degree as them, right? So yeah, that's basically that. Okay, we're not gonna talk about that. That was for my other video. Who to summon for? Now this one's gonna be a debated topic by a lot of people, but I'm just gonna tell you straight up. So we're not including 4 stars on here because people will be targeting 5 stars. There are very powerful 4 stars like Ting Yun, who's one of the best 4 stars in the game. Pella, who's one of the best 4 stars in the game. And there is one more I was thinking of. Wait. Hold on. Who's coming to my topic? I think it's Gwen Ifen. Sorry, I forgot. I had a point on this. Completely forgot. But these 4-star supports, I'll just slide them all over so you guys can see. These 4-star supports here are the ones you're going to be eyeballing instead of like the 4-star, I wouldn't say damage dealers, but more of useful characters, right? We'll put Herta up there. We'll put Sampo up there, right? I'd say probably those guys. Right, so these starting characters for 4 stars, right? Ting Yun, Pella, Gwen Ifen, Asta, Henya, Lynx, Gallagher, I forgot his name for a second, and then Herta. The reason for those 4 stars is that they'll be useful for a variety of positions in your account, and this is mainly targeting at Pella and Ting Yun, as they are the most, like, pretty much the most powerful 4 stars that we've got, right? The other ones are either for specific cases like Herta, or they're just generally pretty solid. Everyone else is either in a niche scenario or not that crazy. And then Sampo is also pretty good for DOT teams. So yeah, I'm not going to talk too much about the 4 stars because mainly the big draw that, you know, gotcha, right, is getting the 5-star characters. If you do want to know more about the 4 stars, you can always ask me, you know, down below or on my Twitch, right, or Discord, any of that stuff. Stick to the channel and you'll find out about them, right? Yeah, that's basically it. There's nothing else. There's a couple other niche cases, but just a general purpose, these 4 stars are the ones you want to look out for, right? Up here at the top, right? These ones. And then everybody else is kind of or niche, right? So yeah, as for who to summon for, I know a lot of people want to, this is what I was talking about, the debate topic. A lot of people want to know this all the time. They're always curious. And the only answers I can give you is Ruin Mei is the only must summon character I would consider a must summon, right? Um, I see no reason to put anyone else in the must summon, but it's the fact that Ruin Mei is as powerful as she does and is so like account changing. It's crazy. She basically works everywhere across the whole game and has one of the best techniques in the entire game because it works in all of the simulated universe event modes. And so this will completely change how you play the game and make general play for like grinding stuff faster. Now there's a caveat to that. There's another 5-star character that does this a similar style of thing in terms of making your general grind faster. But again, that's a DPS versus a support that's basically universal. Except for, funny enough, this DPS's team, unless of course you get, you know, some constellations or eidolons, right? Duplicates of this character. That's a whole nother topic. But Runmei's the only one I would say this. She's crazy. She gives you a certain amount of buffs, unique buffs, has some pseudo defensive support, damage. She does basically it all, right? She's the only character I'd say must summon. Everybody else, it's highly debatable, right? Fu Xuan is overall great. Obviously, I would say get her. Sparkle, same thing. Jingliu and Dan Heng are like the best 2 DPS in the game. Kafka will enable DOT teams to be crazy. Ho Ho is basically the other best sustain in the game. And then Acheron is that character that is in line for one of the top DPS characters. I'll continue to say this in the previous video. She's like top 5, right? I wouldn't say it's like top 3. I don't think she's comparing. She can compare to Jingliu, but in general, I'd say she's top 5. So she is very strong and will help with your general grind, right? So keep that in mind. Very appealing for all these characters. They're all strong in their own right. If you like them, great. You've got an awesome character that you can use in a variety of content that is very powerful, right? So that's awesome. As for the other 5-star characters, I believe that's everybody, unless I'm missing somebody. Somebody's going to point that out, right? As for right now, I would say it like this. I think Adventure... Well, okay, maybe we can put him up here. And I know people are going to debate that, but I think Adventurine's pretty good. Either way, moving on. These are the ones that are good, right? Topaz is a solid character for a specific team setup. You know, the follow-up attack team, if you are a Dr. Ratio enjoyer. And again, if you're playing this game around this time this video comes out, you'll have him for free, right? If you're a Dr. Ratio enjoyer, Topaz is great for his team. And the reason why Dr. Ratio is here is because he is free, right? Currently. That will change in the future when he's not, but with the current context, he's free. And so these two characters aren't good, right? Topaz has less flexibility, but she is a pretty solid support. Luocha, even though he's fantastic, I have him, and he's great everywhere. He's only in specific mode. Alright, so I was rudely interrupted, but anyways, as for the other characters that are just pretty good, Luocha, as I said, I use him. He's very strong, but his general use in terms of being skill point positive is gonna get diminished with Aventurine coming into the game. Black Swan doesn't need Kafka for a DOT team, but she's pretty solid on her own. Sela, who kind of has fallen off because she can't really get a kill to generate her passive throughout the fight, but she's still solid DPS. Jingyu Wan, I'd say probably isn't worth getting. He is strong, but you will need other supportive options like Sparkle to actually help you in his team. As for Silverwolf, I'm going to hate on this unit, not going to lie. She's going to get power crept so hard, you're not going to want to see her ever again. Besides that, I wouldn't say get Argenti unless you like him. He's really only solid in pure fiction. And then Blade, kind of the same reason as Jingyu Wan, just that he's fallen off not having as many supports. Although, you could probably move him up to good, as Sparkle has helped out some of his teams.
You ready for the next talk?
Yep. Alright, as for the other thing, right, the tips for being efficient in farming. You don't need to level up every character's talent. There's only specific talents you need to level up. A perfect example of this is Ruin Mei, who only wants her skill, ult, and trace leveled up, right? Her basic does nothing for her. So you want to look into the character to figure out what they do to make sure you're leveling up the right talent, right? You don't want to waste your trace mats on talents that don't even matter. Like, again, these support basic attacks that you'll basically never use, right? For example, our Japard, who only cares about his shield. That's the main thing. Another thing is that with light cones, you want to be careful about the light cones you level up. Some 3-star light cones are actually very strong, and so you might actually get use out of them, like meshing cogs. Other than that, though, 4-star light cones are generally pretty solid. There are a few that you don't really want to touch, like the Serval one, or day one of, or sorry, subscribe for more, ironically enough. But it will depend on the character. Again, look at the character guides to figure out which light cones level. Some of them just aren't really worth it. Others are, will be better on a specific character, right? I can't really name any for specifically, but generally 5-star light cones are pretty strong across the board and will most of the time be a solid option for a specific character, right? As I said, look for specific character guides on more about that. Now, as for the other farming thing, a lot of people are going to want to know about the shop, right? There are multiple shops in the game, like the store shop for MOC and Pure Fiction, and for light cones. I'll be honest, all these are kind of bad. Quid Pro Quo has some niche uses. Otherwise, though, the only recommendation I can say is get Seriousness of Breakfast. It's a great light cone for any of your erudition characters. Nothing else here is really notable. If you play next update, this defense one will be power crept by other free-to-play light cone that you can get via an event, and then everything else will be a character thing. I think this break one is notable in some cases, but that's only for like one character, and that's really about it. Past and future can be used on like Bronya and Sparkle depending on your team setup, but otherwise none of these are really that strong. Get them if you need an option for a specific character, like Fermenta for DOT characters. Otherwise, I wouldn't worry too much about it. You can just R5 like the breakfast one and then move on from there, right? That's really about that on that point. And then finally, my personal recommendations and future characters. As I've been saying this whole video, someone for who you like, that's really all you need to do. And for future characters and reference, that will be if you want to look into leaks, right? I'm not going to talk about that in this video, right, as it's not really relevant to what I'm talking about, right? I just really explain the current free-to-play experience. And so if you do want to plan for future characters, plan accordingly, right? There's only so much you can do, like saving up resin and fuel, or like Trailblaze power or emulsifiers for Simulated Universe, right? It's really up to you, right? I would say stick with 1 DPS, plan accordingly. So like if you stick with Acheron, look out for characters that are going to buff Acheron, right? If you like Jing Liu, look out for characters that are going to buff Jing Liu. Generally like that, as it will mean you have an easier time going throughout the game and its content. So yeah, that's about it. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.